Hello, and welcome to SteamWorld Quest, Hand of Gilgamech. Pretty great name. Now, the SteamWorld games have actually been going on since, I believe, 2013. Image and Form is the name of the developers, and they have done some pretty interesting things in regards to what they actually want their games to be like. It seems like, more or less, they're sort of taking this aesthetic and the sort of world that they've created and the general mechanical ideas that they like to apply, and just applying them to different genres. You have games like SteamWorld Dig and SteamWorld Dig 2 that were really pretty cool little things, and then you also have things like SteamWorld Heist, which is the more recent one. And it was sort of like a 2D, like XCOM-like game. It was really good. And then suddenly you have SteamWorld Quest, which is an RPG that uses deck-building mechanics. And this is actually really impressive when you consider just how different all of the games that they have made are, and the fact that it seems like no matter what they actually apply themselves to, whatever genre they decide to tackle, they're able to make something really unique and really enjoyable. Just by sort of steeping their world and their creative ideas in it. It's really neat, actually, to see a developer just sort of pursuing different things with each release, but sort of having this interconnecting tie of the theme together with this whole, like, steampunk-esque sort of experience. Now, what SteamWorld Quest actually is, as I mentioned, is an RPG, but it's really more like a JRPG in terms of how it works mechanically, but using deck-building mechanics. And of course, a lot of people are going to immediately think of Slay the Spire when they see something like this, which is fair because that game is incredible, and it most definitely has sort of popularized the whole digital deck-building thing. It was not the first game to do that, but it was one that a lot of people take a lot of influence from when they also have tried since then to do something like this. However, this is not all that like Slay the Spire besides the deck-building part. In fact, Slay the Spire is very much, of course, steeped in roguelite mechanics. It is a roguelite game with individual runs and a lot of randomization and things like that. But SteamWorld Quest is actually more of a traditional JRPG-like formula with, you know, a specific linear line of quests and places that you go to, and not individual runs, but an actual interconnected story from place to place, and characters that you will meet along the way and add to your party, and gear that you can get to customize your party members with to make them stronger or more resistant in different aspects, and all of the normal JRPG stuff. It just happens to be using deck-building mechanics for its character progression and its actual combat. So that's pretty cool because I really enjoy these deck-building based RPGs. I think it's a really cool method of actually, you know, adding flavor and variety to combat, like turn-based combat. But I've never seen one actually done like this before, with not roguelite individual runs or anything, but just like a continuous JRPG story. And it's really cool to see it done in a way that actually harkens back, really, to a lot of old-school JRPGs. It feels very familiar, you know, to me and to other people, I would assume, that have also just played a lot of them in the past. It evokes those feelings while still being something new because of its deck-building combat. The way that the combat actually works is you have 3 cards that you can play every turn. And those 3 cards can be from any of the 3 characters that are allowed in combat. You can have more than 3 characters in your party, of course, but you can only bring 3 of them into combat. You will get more than that. Then you will start with a hand of cards, and also, of course, draw extra cards per turn, and you can play up to 3 of those in any given turn. And there are various types of cards. Most of them are this sort of skill-based cards that take a resource called Steam, which is represented by those glowing orange gears up at the top of the screen. And you gain Steam by using non-Steam using cards. Naturally, just the basic attacks and some other stuff like that. And each character has, of course, a very different suite of cards, skills, spells, attacks, whatever. And you're sort of meant to just create not only a useful deck, but a deck for each character that synergizes with each other. And there are various card types that actually do involve that very directly. For instance, one thing to note is that whatever weapon your characters are equipped with, it will have a so-called chain card, which is a sort of 4th free card, if you think about it, that can actually be played, but in order to activate it, you have to play 3 cards from that same character in a turn. It doesn't matter what kind of cards they are, just 3 in a row from the same character, like that in the background. And if you're able to do that, then you will trigger the chain card. So you get to actually play an extra 4th card. Well, you don't play it directly, but you get what I mean. And it is, of course, dependent on the weapon that they are equipped with, exactly what it is. These tend to be quite powerful, and they don't consume Steam, but they also don't generate it, so they're sort of neutral in that respect. And there are a good number of weapons and things to actually find that you may want to equip to actually, utilize their chain card and have it make sense. Like, for instance, a good combination for the nice green sort of battle mage-y dude at the very top there that you see. His chain with one particular weapon is to fire out this little, like, Hadoken stream of ice damage. That's quite useful because he also has a card that will make enemies more prone to ice damage. It will lower their resistance. So if you play those in a row and then get his chain going, then you end up dealing a bunch of bonus damage on his turn. And that's just one very simple example of how you will want to build your decks based around just a good deck, based around the chain that the current weapon has, and based around what all the other characters have. So there's actually quite a lot of strategy to the combat here because, of course, in a lot of deck builders, you just have yours, a deck, one of them. But in this case, you actually have 3 separate ones that you have to keep working together if you want to actually live, because the combat actually does get pretty challenging in this game. It may be very cute, but it is not easy. And as I guess that's very relevant to their previous games, they look awesome and they have a very unique personality, but they are also not a casual experience. They're actually quite difficult early on. And they continue that throughout the game. And one of the other ways that these cards can actually work together is the sort of tag team-like cards. Occasionally you'll find a card that has the portrait of one of the other characters on it. Just one of the other characters, then whose card that is for. And what you're meant to do is actually play a card from the pictured character before that one. And then they will sort of work together, team up, and it will have some sort of extra effect. It is very much determined on a card-by-card basis exactly what this will do, but one of my favorites was a sort of like a Culling Strike-like card, where it did a lot of damage just by itself. If they were at particularly low health, it did even more damage. However, if you combined it with another character's card beforehand, it actually had a chance to instantly kill a target no matter how much health they had left, unless it was a boss, of course. And that's just yet another example of the whole working together thing. Speaking on the bosses, well, this is one in particular that actually gave me quite a bit of trouble. It took me several turns to beat because it is quite challenging, but the boss fights are very much an interesting aspect because they do tend to not only test your decks and make sure that you definitely know what you're doing, but they also have some kind of unique mechanics in and of themselves. For instance, there are some enemies that you'll find that can build up steam as well. You'll see the gears below their health gauge showing that they have, that many turns until they use some sort of big thing. Who knows what it actually is until it happens, but they can build up steam too. And all bosses can also do this, and of course, naturally, their attacks tend to be even more, we'll say, hard to deal with. And bosses often get multiple turns to help even it up, because it might be just 1 versus 3, so they will maybe get 2 turns, or 2 actions, I suppose you should say, per turn of theirs, which can lead to you being horrifically destroyed if you're not careful. And of course, there is also the idea that there are a lot of status effects in this game, and of course, elemental resistances and the like. So you do have to, well, that's very much a JRPG thing. It's not the kind of thing that is only in those games, of course, but the idea that you may have to equip very specific accessories to help you deal with one particularly difficult boss because of its resistances or whatever, is very much alive in this game. And that always reminds me of like older Final Fantasies and things like that, where, one boss just happened to use a particular type of status effect or a particular element that it was just way too effective with. And so you had to go in there knowing that and defending yourself against it, at least just for that fight, in order to actually live. And this does have some elements of that. So I suppose that is another thing that reminds me very much of, like classic JRPGs. And as you go along, you'll also, of course, find new cards for your people. And there are various ways to do this. There are treasure chests hidden all about the place. Some of them will have gold, some will have accessories and weapons for you to equip, and some will have extra cards. And you tend to get multiple copies of an individual card so that you can, equip more than one if you want to, but of course you do want a balanced deck of cards that actually generate steam versus cards that use them, for instance, because if you end up at a turn where you just can't play anything because all of the things in your hand take steam and you haven't gotten anything to generate it, well, you're kind of screwed. But another interesting way to get them is, as you saw in the background right there for a minute, sometimes just story events, cutscenes and the like will happen that will actually cause some sort of moment of inspiration or moment of like the testing of valor or something like that in one of your characters, and they will actually come away from that event with a new card for you to equip if you want to, which is a neat way to do it. It's of course very much dependent on story progression, but it does give you a different way to actually obtain these cards that is very much relevant to the character themselves. And finally, there is also a crafting system in the game. Occasionally you'll come across a very neat-looking merchant's cart. And in that cart you can do things, of course, like buy and sell. And generally the things you'll be buying and selling are consumables, weapons, and accessories. However, there was also a way to make new cards, and the interesting thing about these particular cards is that the only way to get them is through this crafting system. You won't find them in chests or from story events like the other cards. Any of the crafted ones have to be gotten that way, so it gives you something to work towards. As you can probably tell in the background, whenever you finish a battle or sometimes open chests, you will get crafting materials, and different characters' cards take different varieties of materials based on the theme of their cards. Like, you know, the magic user down there at the bottom, she tends to use scroll fragments as one of the upgrade and crafting materials for her cards, because they're magic based. And so on and so forth, and there are lots and lots of these cards, and as you go through the game, again, just like a JRPG, the shops you encounter will have newer stuff to buy and newer cards to create. And there's also a card upgrading system where you can spend the same resources to actually add stars to the side of the card. As you can see there, that little star on the top left of the card, which shows that it's been upgraded once. And you can upgrade almost all of the cards, not quite all of them, but most of them, several times, and it will alter their effects to give them things like, of course, more damage, more healing, better capabilities to cure status effects, all sorts of things like that. And coming across these materials to upgrade your cards is very, very important, because, as I mentioned, the game does get quite difficult. So having not just a well-balanced arsenal, but a well-upgraded one is pretty much key to your survival. So overall, I've personally been having a whole lot of fun with SteamWorld Quest, because, I mean, deck building mechanics for me are pretty addicting. I really enjoy just the sort of theming that goes on with trying to create very specific strategies via a deck of cards, and that appeals to me a lot. But also, I love JRPGs, and the fact that this reminds me of a very classic feeling, one while also having that newer idea of deck building RPG built into it, is just really neat, and it's a very heady combination that just makes me want to keep playing, which is why I have played a lot of it so far, and it just keeps impressing me with the various types of environments that you go through being really well drawn and just very beautiful, to the various characters that you meet being actually interesting and having a lot of personality. The game just has personality in general, not only because of its very, you know, a medieval fantasy world, but around robots and the like, but also just a lot of personality in the way that the characters act. And of course the dialogue is usually, it's serious at points, but also, you know, deliberately self-referential or humorous at points as well, and it is actually pretty well written, in my opinion. It never gets like cringy or weird or anything like it's trying too hard. It's just fun, and I think that's what I was looking for, just something fun, and that's what SteamWorld Quest is. To be honest, right now, I'm not 100% sure of the full length of the game, but it seems to have quite a lot, because in other reports and screenshots that I've seen, they have quite a few more characters than I do, and a lot more cards and some really interesting sounding stuff like cold-based meteors and multiple elemental bursts and all sorts of things like that. And I've seen lots of screenshots of other bosses and enemies and environments that I haven't seen yet, so even though I've already put about 12 hours into it just within the span of a couple of days, there's obviously a lot more ahead, and that speaks to, I think, just how much in the game there actually is. So the link, as is always true, will be in the description below this video if you want to check it out yourself. It comes out on May 31st, which at the time of recording this video is tomorrow, and it's going to be available for $25 US or your regional equivalent. So that's actually pretty good, in my opinion, for an actual classic full-on JRPG that has seemingly dozens of hours of content in it. It's a really cool concept, I think, is this whole deck building thing that we're seeing more and more of, and games like this that are applying it to a different genre than just using a sort of roguelite element. Even though I love those, it's cool to see something different. So it makes me excited for the future, I guess you could say, of when we have studios like this that are really good at just taking their ideas and combining them with various popular mechanics and then just mastering a genre in their own way is just really cool to see. And that is exactly what they've been doing since SteamWorld Dig, and I am very excited to see what they'll do next. So, SteamWorld Quest, everyone, $25, May 31st. Check it out yourself. And I think it's also available on Switch. So if you have a Switch, you can go and play it as well. And that would actually be a really good other platform for this, because of its portable nature. That would be a lot of fun to have if you're like just chilling in a hotel or something and you want to have some fun. It would be a lot better than many mobile games. And I guess that's not saying much, but still, it would be a really fun experience to play this on the go as well. So, thank you guys very much for watching. If you have Any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Please do like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't, and tell me why. And that's that. SteamWorld Quest, Hand of Gilgamech, everyone. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.